Hi guys, this is a quick deep hip opening sequence, perfect for after a workout, after a vinyasa class, or when you're really warm. So make sure you're nice and warm. We're going to work deep into the hips. Have a couple props handy if you like to use props, especially for deep hip openers, a block, bolster, whatever you need. When you're ready, we'll meet in downward facing dog. Push the mat away, send the hips up towards the sky, and take a moment to pedal out the feet. And once you're ready to settle into stillness, send the hips up and back. Send the energy down through the heels, maybe a micro bend in the knees. Draw your belly button in towards your spine. As you inhale, lengthen the right leg up and back for three-legged dog. Bend the knee, open the hip, circle the hip a few times. Come to stillness, keep the bend in the knee, and then bring the right knee forward and around the side to the outside of your right elbow for a little tap. And then place the right foot on the outside of the right hand for lizard lunge. Take a few moments, take some movements here before you settle into stillness. Get right into the hip here, drop the back knee, untuck the back toes, and just allow yourself to settle in. The right knee can push in towards the right shoulder to keep a little bit of engagement. And then as you feel your hip flexor, maybe the front, your right hip flexor and the front of the left leg, the quad, the psoas, feel that start to open up. Maybe crawl down onto your forearms, or option to use a block to bring the ground a little closer, especially if you're tight in the hips. For me, I have really tight hip flexors, especially this right one. So I find often I'm on a block here. So find your depth and then breathe through any sensations that you might be feeling. Slowly crawl yourself back up, remove the block if you have it, and then scoot your right foot across the other side of the mat. We'll come into pigeon pose here. So your right shin is parallel towards the front of the mat. If you can't quite get there, again, because you're tight in the hips, a 45 is fine. Your back leg is long behind you, directly behind the hip. And then think about squaring your hips forward. Soften the back toes. If you're struggling here and you're really tight, you can bring a block under the hip. Sometimes I find it's not super comfortable on the hip and actually more on the leg. So more in front like this. And then you can get that parallel shin if that's okay for the knee. So find what works. Couple breaths upright here. Keep squaring the hips. And then slowly walk your upper body forward. You can always use your bolster here to lay on. Keep a little bit of activation in the hips, so keep that squaring action, but then let everything else be really heavy. Find a place to rest your head, whether it's on the mat, on the tops of your hands. Maybe use your block. Allow your whole upper body to be heavy. Be here for a few breaths. Try and let go of any tension you might be holding in the hips. Slowly crawl yourself back up. Sit back onto the right hip, and if your shin's not parallel, bring it up parallel. And then swing the back leg around. We'll come into double pigeon, or sometimes called fire log pose. So your front shin is parallel to the short edge of the mat in front, and then you're going to try and stack your ankle over your knee, and then your knee over your ankle. So you can turn and see this is where we're going. Sometimes this is a really intense pose, so if you're up here, that's totally fine. Just try and send that left sit bone down towards the mat. And I find I am a little tight in my hips, so I just widen the stance a little, and it'll be a little easier just so you can get that sit bone down. You can always stick a block under here, whatever works. Find your depth. Take a few breaths upright here. An option to stay here or begin to crawl your upper body forward. Keep breathing. Let go of any tension. Feeling this really intense on the outer hips. This is one of my favorite hip openers, even though it's really intense. Slowly crawl yourself back up. Release the legs. Take a little windshield wiper of the knees. And then we'll meet back in downward facing dog. Take a moment here to ground, to reset. Any little movements you might need. And then with your next inhale, lift the left leg up and back for three-legged dog. Bend the knee, open the hip. Take a couple nice big hip circles. Feels good after that last intense hip opener. Come to stillness, rise up high onto the right toes, and then circle the left knee around. Tap the outside of the left elbow, and then place the left foot to the outside of the left hand for lizard lunge. Take a moment here before you drop the back knee to bring some engagement into the legs. Press that left knee into the left shoulder to help with that inner thigh engagement. And then when you're ready, drop the back knee, untuck the toes, and settle into the lizard lunge. Find your depth. Maybe use your block. Bring the ground a little bit closer to you. Keep that left knee pressing into the left shoulder to keep the knee from splaying out. Slowly crawl yourself back up. Remove your block if you have it. And then walk the left foot across the front of the mat for pigeon pose. The left shin is parallel towards the front of the mat or on a 45, whatever works better for you. Square the hips forward and down. Again, option to bring that block under the left hip or left leg. Your back leg is long down the mat, directly in line with the hip. Toes are untucked and pointed. Nice and straight. You're not sickling the heel. Glance back and make sure. And then slowly walk your upper body forward. Keep just enough activation in the inner thighs to keep squaring the hips forward, and then allow everything to be heavy. Make sure you're finding a place to rest your head or your upper body. Bolster works great here. With every exhale, let go of just a little bit more tension. Slowly curl yourself back up. Parallel that front shin if you haven't already, and then shift onto the left hip and then scoot the right leg around and forward for your double pigeon, stacking the right ankle over the left knee and the right knee over the left ankle. Keep your feet flexed. Find your depth in this pose. This one can be intense. Sit nice and tall. Remember to breathe. It's so important to breathe in these hip openers. I find there can be a lot of tension, so you end up holding on to your breath, and it creates even more tension instead of letting it go. Option to crawl yourself forward. So you shift the stretch a little bit. You can stay upright too, that's totally fine. Slowly crawl yourself back up. Take a little windshield wiper of the knees. Scoot yourself towards the back of the mat. Take your knees as wide as the mat, toes together to touch. Sit your hips back onto your heels and then walk your upper body forward for child's pose, resting the forehead into the mat. This nice wide leg child's pose always feels good on the hips. Take as much time as you need here. I hope these hip openers you found helpful. You can always take this sequence on your own and spend way more time in each posture. This was just a quick little sequence today. Thank you so much for taking the time to practice with me. Namaste.